Hi, it's Josh Rubin with the Rubin team. Let's take a look. For joining us again, Stephanie Younger here from the west side of LA. Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us on today's Rubin Special.
Hey, Josh, it's so great to be here. I didn't realize I was getting such an amazing video introduction.
Absolutely. So, Stephanie, tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the business there in LA?
Well, I've been in real estate for 20 years here, and I'm very fortunate to say that I live where I work. We really cover the west side of Los Angeles, but primarily the Silicon Beach market. So, all the coastal communities from the airport to basically Malibu. And so it's been a great, being able to live and work in the same market has been a wonderful positive attribute to the success of our business, and also just the success of my life and my lifestyle. So that's been wonderful. And prior to real estate, I had a background in hospitality. I worked in special event management, in luxury hotel special event management, and high-end restaurants. So
wow.
That's kind of what I did for years before that.
Cool. And tell me about the transition from hospitality to real estate. How did you do that, and what inspired you?
Well, I mean, I think that, I don't know about you, Josh, but I always had that experience where every place I ever worked, I always ended up being like someone else's top employee. I was hardworking, I was smart, I was creative, I was service oriented, and you do that enough times, and you finally say, well, maybe I could be my own top employee. And so I was newly married, and my husband was really supportive, and so I started to kind of investigate what opportunities are there out there for somebody who has my particular skill set, is friendly, professional, service oriented. But also where I could really have a sense of being able to build my own potential, and not have any limits put on me by other people's ambitions. And so, I had a wonderful neighbor growing up who was a real estate agent, and I kind of looked at her and I thought, if she can do this, I can definitely do this. So that was it's not a very auspicious story, but that's how I got here.
No, I think it's interesting that as you were growing up, the woman next door, proverbially speaking, was your inspiration. Did she know that growing up, that you looked up to her?
No, not at all. But I did, I called her. She actually kind of discouraged me from trying to get into real estate at the time. She's like, I think you'd be great in title. But now looking back on it, I think she was worried.
Yeah, I was going to say, she probably thought that she'd have to look out for you, and you're going to be her, greatest source of competition.
Right. So, and I'm born and raised in LA, and there aren't that many of us really. My dad actually grew up in the neighborhood that I currently live and work in. So I have very deep roots here. And, so that all that has kind of come together to create this business where we really, in addition to selling real estate, we really support our community through events, through contribution, through great ideas and adding to other people's ideas, and we really try to be a member of the community at all kinds of different levels. And part of that is just selfish. I'm going to be at all these places anyway, doing all these great things anyway, and I want to bring it all full circle.
Yeah, that's interesting because you're so deep rooted in the community, and it's not just you who showed up there with your family and said, okay, now I'm going to be a real estate agent, but you actually grew up there. Not only that, but your dad grew up there. So you have all these relationships and this amazing foundation. Have you found that, things can get complicated when a deal goes sideways?
Do they go sideways, Josh? I don't know. I really try hard not to let that happen. But, it's funny because I think I've worked hard over the years to make sure that my sphere of influence was very much a part of my business. So from the very beginning, that's really where I started. Probably like you, I started by working with my friends, working with my family, working with the people that my husband worked with, and trying to grow my business through the people I knew. So I never really had like a concern or a bias about working with somebody that I knew. And in fact, what I came to realize some years later was, in this community, I'm going to go to the little Vons grocery store down the street, 3 times a week, and I'm going to run into people that I either sold a house to or sold a house for, or an agent I worked with, or somebody that came to my open house. And I want to be able to be in that grocery store and see those people in the aisle and feel totally okay with it. So whether or not the deal is right or wrong, I really do try to feel like, everyone doesn't have to like me, but they have to believe that I act with integrity. And if they believe that, then when they see me in the grocery store, whether or not they like me or they were happy with the result, it doesn't matter, because at least they feel like I'm a person of integrity. So it's been a good guiding principle for me. Like, and I finally started to talk to people about that in my listing presentation. Like, listen, I want to be the kind of person that you work with, that when we see each other in the Vons a year from now, it's going to be okay. You're going to be happy to see me, and I'm not going to hide from you, in the produce aisle.
Be hiding amongst the vegetables, and I can it's like a scene from that Annette Bening would be in. Or something,
Totally.
And so over the last 20 years, it's interesting because I feel like there are sort of 3 different types of agents in today's market. There are the people who are sort of in the twilight of their career, who have been in the business for, say, 30 or 40 years, and they're sort of on their way to retirement or in retirement, and they'll pick up a few deals here and there just to help their friends. Then there are people like us who have been in the business for 15, 20, 30 years. And then there are those who got into the business within the last, say, 5 years plus or minus, and have just seen this market go bang, 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 up, largely the result of the stimulus that the Fed put in place with the exceptionally low rates. And of course, these agents know nothing but an up market, and we're going to see a lot of those agents sort of spin out of this business in the next year or two, when they realize that things are going to get pretty challenging. But with agents like us who have been in it for 20 or more years, what are some of the challenges that you faced in your career?
Well, I don't know how well 2007, 2008 treated you, but it was rough on me.
Yeah.
I got in the business in, 2002, and I was in that same sort of like, I had a nice 5 years of an up market. So I really cut my teeth in an up market. The good thing is that I had an agent in my office who was like a twilight in his career agent, and he'd been the #1 agent in the West Side for a lot of years. So I looked at what he did, and I was really aware of the benefits of like being a farming agent, being a community supporter, being somebody who was sort of hyper locally focused. And so I had some of these, I was in coaching early on. So I had a lot of skills that I developed, and I did very well for somebody in the first 5 years of my business. But, by 2007, I was living like I was a high producer, and I hadn't quite learned the skill of how to be a smart agent with money, with time, with resources. And so, the pause in sales was really hard on me, frankly. I think I did I was 5 years in, and I sold, $16 million worth of real estate in the first, from January to August. And then the countrywide debacle happened in 2007. I didn't sell another house until March of the next year.
Wow.
And yeah, it was stressful, to say the least. Also, side note, I was having a baby in May. So that was really stressful. So, what happened
so your due date was May of 2008?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And our market stopped really before a lot of other people's markets, I will say. Beverly Hills and Orange County was still going gangbusters mid-2008. Right. Our market was definitely an entry-level market with a lot of people who bought with 0% down loans, and a lot of people who felt like they could buy a house because they weren't asked to really qualify. And so those people were affected pretty quickly. And whereas people with more affluence and other parts of the city, that didn't quite start to feel the pain of that till the next year. So I kind of felt like, looking back on it, I was a little bit of a canary in the coal mine, because I was trucking along in 2007, and then my business literally came to a halt.
Wow.
And so it was about 60 days of, the phone not ringing, nothing selling, deals canceling. And I called my coach and I, said, okay, this isn't good. I'm thinking 6 months out and, baby and business and all these things. And
yeah.
And
Well,
he said,
life, right?
Life, right?
The pressure of life.
He said, well, what can you do that you haven't been doing? And I said, well, frankly, I haven't been door knocking. And that's really what I did a lot of the first few years. So he said, well, let's get back out there. And I had nothing else to do. The phone wasn't ringing, all those things. And so I went out.
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. So I started door knocking in October, 3 hours a day. Again, side note, I was pregnant and I door knocked that much until February. And my phone was ringing in March and it hasn't stopped ringing since. And what happened was I had the little pause, and by March, people were like, uh-oh, we better get out of these houses. Yeah. And so it was an interesting, it was an interesting opportunity for me to become a listing agent in a way I hadn't been before. And to, really lean far forward into the fact that I had really built a business over 5 years, and prospecting fundamentals kept me safe and whole during that time. So
you were back to basics all through your pregnancy up until March, until you were like 7 months pregnant, right?
Yeah. Until it just got ridiculous.
Right.
Right.
But then, I was waiting for you to tell us that you walked yourself into labor and you actually, your water broke on somebody's, front porch or something.
If there's agents watching this show and they don't door knock, and they happen to also be pregnant, I highly recommend it, because people are really very empathetic to somebody who's out there working that hard.
Absolutely.
So, and after that, we continued to have a practice of door knocking at a high level. I really door knocked myself for the first 10 years of my career. It's hard for me now because if I go to a door, I see somebody, I know I'm there for an hour, so I don't get very far. But that's why events are so great for us and great for my team. And then, my team still door knocks today. Yeah. So we believe in that. I mean, we're strategic about it. I was a little bit more like up one block and down the other until I got through them all. But
right. Well, I was actually gonna ask you, Stephanie, when you door knock, for our listeners, how do you choose the communities you door knock?
Well, I have always farmed this area that I live in. And so if you are a farming agent and you're not door knocking, I think that's a lost opportunity. So, I door knock where I mail, and I door knock where I work, and I door knock where, I support the community. And so what happens is you're a recognizable face when you knock on the door. And my team is a recognizable brand now when they knock on the door. So that all of these things support each other. And, I suppose you could go anywhere and drop into a neighborhood and start door knocking, and that will work, but you're going to have to get to that door 4 times a year. So we were able to get to each door a little bit less frequently because we were supporting it with all of these other contact points. Yeah. And so, in an effort to get people not to overthink the process, I was just like, we go from east to west. And when we're done, we go back to east and go west. And now what we do is we really focus on door knocking around our listings. So when we have a new listing coming up, we spend the days before that getting the team on the say 1,000 doors around that house to get people to come to the open house. So it's really a very soft approach. It's, hi, it's Josh from the Stephanie Younger group. By the way, you can join anytime. I'd love it. And, we're just making our usual rounds, and we wanted to invite you to our open house on Sunday. And, did you know that the house down the street is for sale? And they would be like, no, I had no idea. And so then it opens up this conversation about real estate, about the market, without people feeling like we're there to sell them something. And we're just really trying to make sure that we are top of mind all the time. Wow.
So that's great. So it's really a branding opportunity for you and for the team and the agents, of course, that work with you, right?
Yeah. And, I'll say, sorry, I don't mean to be so chatty, but I'll say one more thing about the last recession, which I feel like is carrying forward right now, is after I came through that process, one of the things that I really promised myself was that I would build a recession-proof business. I wanted to build a business in real estate where I would be selling houses whether the market was up, and it mattered to me, and it doesn't. The market is doing. I'm going to sell houses all the time, every year. And so that's part of how the team grew and how the business grew. I realized that if I wanted to create that kind of insurance for myself and my team, that I would grow a business where we were doing business regularly. And, I know it's great to sell, a $25 million house, but I always had that mindset of like, I'd rather sell 25 $1 million houses than one $25 million house.
Yeah. It's funny, Stephanie, because I have the same philosophy. So many people are focused on luxury. I have to do luxury. I only want to sell homes that are 3 million or 5 million or 10 million or more. And you know what happens? You are so focused on finding that proverbial needle in a haystack, you do absolutely nothing. And you're so frustrated that you wind up working yourself right out into another industry altogether. And it's because you're so focused on finding the penultimate transaction. You know how many deals that I've done that are, luxury, ultra luxury? Very few. And that's because I am focused on the broader market, not just, that 10 or $20 million deal. But I want to help people that want to do a $300,000 or a $500,000 or a $700,000 transaction. And that's how we wind up doing hundreds of transactions over the course of the year. And it's really about the cumulative total of the volume over the course of the year than it is, riding in on some white horse doing some 5, 10, $20 million deal. It's like, hey, that's great. And Gary Gold does it so well. He sells houses that are 30, 50, $100 million. But, if you wait around for that $100 million opportunity, you're going to go broke in the process.
I mean, I know we might be like unicorns in that philosophy. People think we're crazy, but I could not agree with you more. So we're like kindred spirits on two different coasts. But, I really believe that. I also believe from a business perspective that I can control to an extent. I can control the number of transactions I do. It's harder to control the sales volume I do. So for me, sales volume is a byproduct of doing transactions. And what people forget when they're chasing the big shark, or the big fish. What people forget when they're chasing the big fish is that if over time if you do enough business over time, you're going to ladder into higher sales. My $700,000 buyer from 10 years ago then buys a $2 million house, then sells the $2 million house for $3 million and buys a $5 million house. So by default,
to that point, okay, like you sold a $700,000 that turned into a $2 million that turned into a 3 and a 5. Years ago, when I first got into the business, I was focused on rentals. Why? Because guess what? I had no money, I had rent to pay, and I had to eat, right? So I was doing rentals, and I was meeting these kids that are coming out of NYU and Columbia and all these different schools here in the city, and they wanted to stay in the city. So I rented this kid an apartment for $1,300 a month, and he went on to do over $70 million worth of transactions, and one of the most successful entrepreneurs to come out of Silicon Alley here in New York. And his company is now public, and he's a billionaire. So you really have no idea who you're rubbing elbows with.
You don't. That's the beauty of also having a business that's, starts with your sphere of influence and ends up being repeat and referral. Because if you take care of those people over time, not only do you become more successful, but they become more successful. And, it's a growth mindset that the compounding effect really does work. And it doesn't just work for you and your business, it works for your clients. And, most people in life, most people who work hard or study hard or apply themselves have some kind of an upward trajectory. Whether it's this way or this way, I don't, that depends. But, most people do try to better themselves. And as a result, they try to improve their place in the world. And I want to be there when they're ready to do that.
Right. Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head, Stephanie, with the fact that it's really all about mindset. And so many people get into this business thinking it's going to be so easy, and they're going to meet somebody and they're going to take them out and sell them an apartment. But you really have to be in that mindset that you're there to help people. You're not just there to make a commission. And it might not be the first person, it might not be the third person, but the more people you meet, the more people you speak to, And the more people you take out and show houses to, or have a meeting about selling their house, is the more likely you're going to do a transaction, whether it be with those people or other people that you know. There was one guy back in 2009 who I was, to your point, 2007 and 8 were very challenging. We had a lot of time on our hands, and we got back to basics. That's how most of us got through that. And I wound up getting a for sale by owner listing that was a $900,000 listing. I fought like hell to get it sold because we wound up dealing with a low appraisal issue that I fought for a week to get it revised and appealed. We got it to appraise, and then he subsequently referred someone to me whose apartment I sold for $3 million. And in the course of selling that apartment, I met someone else who I sold an apartment to for $2 million, and that person referred someone else who went on to do a total of about $23 million worth of business. And it's really just all about mindset and putting yourself out there and working as hard as you possibly can to help people and do the best for them.
It's interesting because I think you with anything, you grow in your maturity level of understanding how important what we do is for people. Yeah. And it takes that kind of understanding the fabric of the different reasons people buy and sell houses to really appreciate how big of a deal it is for the person that you're working with. And I had this great piece of coaching one time from a woman that I was in a coaching group with, and she said, every time I drive to see a client, before I get out of the car, I take a moment and I say, please let me be of service to this person. And, it sounds a little bit, a little bit cheesy maybe, but I really actually started to do that after she gave me that advice, to make sure I took a minute before I met with any client. And now with my team, to really feel like, how can I be of service in this moment for that person? Because if I come from that place always, then whether I work with that person or not, I'm gonna feel good about what I've done. And as my business has grown and I'm less able to, always be in that one-on-one, assisting people in that one-on-one way. Sure. The way I'm doing that is by giving back to the community. And I will say that, people really believe that, and it's true, that we authentically love and support the community, and they want to work with us because they recognize that we make a difference, not just in the way their lives are, but in the value of their homes over time. And so for me, that's been my way to give, to be of service on a bigger scale.
Yeah, it puts you in the right frame of mind before you actually meet with people. You go into the meeting, and you actually are really able to help them in a more meaningful way. Yeah, so I think that's remarkable. Stephanie, some of the questions that we're getting from our viewers are pretty interesting. One of them is how often do you mail? What's your frequency?
Josh, my live video ended. Do you want me to fix that, or is that something I did?
It's probably my connection, so we can just carry on.
All right. Yeah. Well, I love that. So we mail twice a month to our entire farm, which is about 20,000 homes. And then we mail around our listings.
Cool. So when you say mail around your listings, you mean when you get a new listing, you'll send a card out announcing that you have the listing, and that'll put you in front of the same farm again?
Exactly. So we'll send 500 or 1,000 pieces, depending on where it is, or to the building if it's in a condo. And so that goes out every time we're announcing a new listing. So it's, and a lot of those are in the farm, so it ends up being a little bit of a layer effect. So, if they're in the farm, they might hear from us via mail a few times a month. But if they're out of the farm, then they're certainly getting a piece of mail from us within, a week of the listing. So it's a big, heavy investment in mail, but I felt like,
don't I know it?
Mm-hmm, right. You do. I realized in the pandemic that, we were spending money on all these other things that we could do belly to belly. And since we weren't spending that money, rather than put it in our pocket and wait, we put it into mail because that was something we could still do. And it was great because a lot of other agents pulled back on their mail. So it was a really good opportunity to reach our farm in a more meaningful way, because there was a lot less, mail competition out there. So that was a really good thing that we did at the start of the pandemic, was not to retreat too much. We
Yeah.
filed for a PPP loan, and we really put that money to work, actually.
Cool. And so have there been any other investments that you've made in the business as a result of the the SBA or PPP loans?
I will say that we have grown our team in the process. So,
Yep.
We also realized that work was physically more demanding because, you couldn't do as much easily. And so,
Sure.
we actually added some staff members, and now
Cool.
we feel like we, can't live without this sort of team structure that we re-galvanized around.
Yeah.
So it really works for us. I like to call my team a team of specialists. So we have listing
Uh-huh.
agents, and we have a whole listing team, staff team that supports them. And then
Yep.
we have buyer specialists. And so, as we've grown the team in the pandemic, we've really leaned into this model and staffed it even better. So that was something we did. And we also, I guess, invested in being a Zillow Flex agent. So, we joined Zillow Flex fortuitously, like in April of 2020. And that was really good for us over the pandemic. So we had to invest in some other resources and staff to help train and lead that team. So, there was, I think, investment in people probably more than other types of infrastructure. I mean, invested in a lot of technology, went really hard into our follow-up boss investment and making sure that we had all the right technology to be able to operate, a virtual or hybrid business. So those kinds of things.
So the right foundational tools, not to mention the talent to help you really get to the next level.
And when I bought a whole lot of branded hand sanitizing stations,
Sure.
and we still use them. People are like, "Oh, that's so nice,"
Yeah. Wherever you need us, that's where we are.
Yeah.
And so, speaking of, the Zillow Flex program, have you had any experience with ISAs?
Yes, we have.
Which, of course, is the internal sales associate. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we have a number of virtual staff members, and we've used them in various ways over the last couple of years. And we have, I think initially we really tried to have that kind of virtual ISA model, but now we really have them very much in a support role. We aren't using an ISA in a dedicated way, Josh. We really have felt that here, but by the time they come in through Zillow and they talk to Zillow and then they talk to the ISA and then they talk to the agent and then they maybe talk to other people along the way, there were too many touch points and too many handoffs and too many ways to lose the interest of the client. So we just have really focused on speed to lead with inbound, with our inbound leads, and making sure that our agents, we have we call it GSD rather than lead duty. We call it GSD time, which is getting stuff done. It's
a diplomatic way of what I was thinking it was.
Yes, exactly. And the point of a GSD day is each agent has a half a day at a time and plus a night shift. And they're encouraged to be here in the office and to be prepared and ready to take a lead as it comes and to respond to it immediately. And while they're here, get stuff done. Look at, I almost slipped up there. Get stuff done, clean up your CRM, do your lead follow-up. So that time is really valuable to people. And, they really complained at the beginning, but they've come to really like it now.
Wow. And how many people are on your team at this point?
I have 24 agents that work with buyers. I have 3 listing agents beside myself. I still do some listing business myself. I have a listing partner that always works with me, but and then we have 14 full-time staff people.
I'm sorry, 14?
Yeah.
And what's the breakdown of people who are actually boots on the ground there with you in the office physically versus the virtual?
A lot. So I think that doesn't even count our virtual assistants, actually. So
that doesn't count the virtual assistant.
Yeah. So
wow.
So I have a business partner who is basically our managing partner now. He is my partner, and he really runs the operation. And then underneath him, I have someone who leads our escrow team. So she oversees our 2 escrow managers, and they take all of the business. Once the agents get the home under contract, the escrow manager steps in and takes it from contract to closing. And then we have our listing director who oversees the staff team that takes the listing from contract to on the market to under contract. So our staff is coming in at all those administrative points, and the agents are expected to, oversee and make sure that everything is happening and that our staff is giving good service and all of those things. But the staff is really taking all the administrative work off the agents. The agents can really focus on being attentive to their client, making sure that they're keeping their client informed on the market, and going out to find new clients.
Yeah. It's interesting because that's something that I work with on my team with regularly, which is to make sure that the agents are focusing on the revenue driving activities, right? Speaking to more people, meeting with more people, showing more homes, showing more listings, meeting with more prospective sellers, and prospecting. Anything outside of that is a waste of their time. They really need to focus on sort of the front of the house rather than being all things to all people. And we have the support staff in order to, get what needs to be done. Once they have the offer in and it's accepted, then it's really, a matter of the support staff and the attorneys and the various vendors that need to do what they do best, which is really to support them. But it's been a little bit of a struggle because I find that we as people naturally want to feel like we're in control. And in order to feel like we're in control, a lot of agents, want to have their hands dirty in things that are not necessarily, let's call it the highest and best use of their time. Have you run into similar challenges with your team?
Well, delegation is a really high skill, and it's a very hard thing to learn. I mean, you and I could probably have a whole conversation about how hard it was for us to learn to delegate. And the thing that the agents I think struggle with is, part of being able to confidently delegate is that you might be the one to have trained that person who you're going to delegate to, and they know exactly what you need and exactly what you want. I think the agents feel a little bit like, well, I don't have that oversight of this staff person. So, I think it's part of it is making sure that as a team leader, our staff is doing a good enough job that the agent feels confident to release some of that responsibility to the staff, and then making sure that as a team leader, we're starting to do a better job with the follow up and oversight of these people, or whoever is responsible for follow up and oversight of these people, and having really clear roles and responsibilities, and then working with the agents to coach and train them to be better managers and delegators. They don't think of themselves as having to manage people. They just think of themselves as real estate agents. And, there's a sales part of the process and a process management part of the process. And, it's 2 different brain functions really. And they have to be mature enough to get around that the most important part of the process is just the escrow. It's really understanding how to represent a client into escrow in the first place, understanding the market, understanding how to be smart in a sales process. And so that's really where we want them focusing their skills and try to take everything else off the plate. But I do feel like you have to take their, fingers and pry it off of the deal sometimes. And my more seasoned agents are definitely better at that because they've had more time and more experience and more opportunity. And so, I find it's a struggle still. And then there's that thing about the new agents is you want them to know what they're doing. So you don't want them to delegate too much at first so that they can learn. Sure. And then, it's the ones in the middle who, have a hard time seeing the forest for the trees. But, I guess you and I were probably the same way.
Yeah, I think largely similar. We have similar challenges that we're dealing with and similar business models, except of course we can't door knock because Most of the buildings are behind certainly locked doors, if not actual door staff that'll prevent us from, even dropping leaflets at the doors. I mean, I remember years ago, when people would get an at-home food delivery, let's call it Chinese food because that's what's most popular here in New York. The delivery person would go up to the person's apartment, and then they would spend the next hour dropping menus under everyone's door, running up and down the halls and down the stairs. And of course, they stopped that. And now they just take the food from them, and then the doorman will bring it up to the resident of the building in order to prevent the old school menu drop. So we can't even do that. So it's really just a matter of mailing and working with our sphere and our past clients. Social media, of course, is a great way to reach people, and circle dialing. So, and then of course there's the expireds, the for sale by owner, and estates. But it's really just mailing and talking about going back to basics. One of the most successful pieces of mail that I've ever done is just good old market data. You want to be the neighborhood expert and be perceived as the person who knows about the state of the market. And people always want to know, how is the market doing really? Because if you read the media and if you turn on your TV, you're going to think that everything's going to hell in a handbasket. But in reality, the people like us who are at the top of our class are still doing transactions, right?
Right.
Yeah. So markets will move. The stock market has, corrected itself. It's broken through its recent lows. Rates are up at a record clip over the last 6 months. But at the end of the day, people still need to buy and people still need to sell. So it's up to, the experts like us in order to guide them through the process.
I was thinking about the rates recently, and it is funny how even an experienced home buyer gets really stuck on this concept of the interest rate.
Yeah.
But the reality is that I have clients who are refinancing their loans 2, 3, 4 times a year sometimes to chase down a quarter point.
Yeah.
And so really not to call out all the home buyers, but really we're talking to our home buyers about the fact that this interest rate, that can be refinanced. That can be bought down. That can change over time. But if you can buy your house at a better price, then you're locking in that purchase price until you sell that property. So really, the interest rate is a very short-term part of the problem, because look, I suppose we could expect that rates could continue to go up and not come back down like they were in the 70s and 80s. But that hasn't been the reality over history. The likelihood that we see 17% rates again, like our parents like to tell us about, that's, I don't want to say that could never happen, but that's not going to happen in the next 2 to 10 years unless things change dramatically, right? So assuming that rates continue to do what they've done over the last 30 years, it's safe to assume that this spike will change. Maybe we won't get down to 2.5% again, but the 5% will, easily become a 4 or a 3.5, and then they might go up again, and then they might come down again. And so we should all assume that this rate piece of this is a short-term problem. So lock in your lower price than you would have paid a year ago. Lock in your lower price, and as soon as you get the opportunity to refinance. The other thing I'm talking to my agents about is have your client buy the house and ask the seller to pay. We haven't asked sellers to pay points in a while. Why not ask the seller to pay points to buy your loan down? If I'm a seller and I want a January price, and all you have to do is give me an extra point so I can buy my loan down, I'm saying yes all day long to that, right? Yeah. So I think that the rates are, I don't know. I think we should stop talking about the rates, frankly. Not you and me, but in general.
Right. No, I get it. It shouldn't really be a primary focus of people's decision making.
Right.
At the end of the day, as you pointed out, people can refinance. The other thing that creative sellers are doing is saying, hey, I have a loan at 2%. So why doesn't the buyer purchase the property and we can hold the mortgage and we'll honor the same 2% rate that we have with our current lender. and they can just pay us and we'll pay the lender. So, if people want to sell, there's all sorts of different ways that you can structure a transaction to make it advantageous to both parties.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's where the fact that, you and I have been around for 20 years is that, we're going to be able to bring that kind of creative problem solving to the table. And, I imagine it's going to be tough for agents who have only been in the business where, you just showed up and sold a house. It takes a lot of years to understand how to structure a deal like that. It takes a lot of years how to understand the ability to talk to a buyer about why the rate shouldn't be the driver of the situation. So, again, that's really what we're working with our team on, is these creative conversations and listening to what's really driving this buyer. Why are they so concerned about this issue, and how can we help them, overcome that?
Yeah. That's interesting, Stephanie. And, one thing that I like to ask people on this show is, especially for people like us who've been at this for so long, is there one transaction that stands out to you over your career?
Wow. Boy, that's a tricky question. I mean, yes, there certainly are a couple for various reasons, right? I remember one time, and you learn from all of these deals, right?
Absolutely.
To our point earlier, we have a $13 million listing right now, and that's just the cumulative effect of time and experience. Yep. And, this comes from an agent who joined my team, and it was a referral from somebody who she leased a property to. She didn't even sell them a property, but They were so impressed by her and her professionalism. And then when she joined a team that had a lot of track record, they were like, now we feel comfortable referring our financial clients to you. And, we showed up at this listing in an area that, we know well because it's in our marketplace. However, it's not our farm market. And the seller was so impressed by our track record, our ability to problem solve, our focus on them and their needs and their house, as opposed to, I don't know, the ego, the celebrity piece of it, the sort of like, outward facing appearance. They were just so relieved that we actually knew what we were doing, and we were focused on them and their issues and the best way to sell their home so that they could walk away from it and never think about it again. So, I think all those hard deals, but I'll never forget one house early on where my client was buying and selling a house, and he thought that he had a credit line on a different house, but the credit line was actually on the house that he was selling. And he didn't tell me about it. And I didn't I didn't understand how to look for it at the time. It was very early on in my career. Sure. Yeah. And so when we got to the closing table, a week or so before, he was a short sale because he had this big second that he thought was on his other house. And he wasn't aware, and I wasn't aware. And it wasn't until we got to the end that there wasn't enough money to bring to the closing table. And so we had to creatively work with the buyer to make them okay with waiting, and get him to refinance the HELOC on one house and move the HELOC onto the other house. It was like a very complex situation. And so
so Stephanie, I got to ask you, when did you realize that the credit line was on the house that you were selling?
I mean, at the last minute when the escrow called and said, "Did you know there's a HELOC and this is a short sale?"
So this is the day. This is the day on the settlement. A few days prior to settlement.
Yep.
So you're basically landing this plane, and you're on final approach, and then by the way, did you realize that you have this outstanding loan? And you're like, what? And so then you had to basically sort of adjourn the closing or reschedule it for a later date, and you could work this stuff out.
And then so then also the other things that you learn, and I don't know how you sell mostly condos, right? So I don't know how like it inspect.
Well, we don't sell too many houses.
Okay.
But we sell co-ops predominantly, and condos. But there are certainly townhouses. I have quite a few buyers I'm working with who are looking at townhouses.
So when I got into this business, I never realized that I'd also be a sewer expert, a mold expert. I sold one house that this wonderful man who was like a handyman for this elderly woman.
Yeah.
She passed away and she left the house to him, so he knew nothing about it. And the house was very old, and it was built on base. A lot had been split many years ago.
Yeah.
And so we get into the house, we get the house under contract. The buyer comes and does their sewer inspection. They're like, this sewer is broken. We can't get the line down it. And so I bring in a couple of others, and no one could get the line down it. And I finally bring in like a heavy hitter, and he's like, there's actually no sewer line here. This is a septic tank. Well, we don't.
Oh my God.
There's no septics where we are. Like, this is not a thing. And so it was a really interesting problem. And you can't put a new septic, right. And that one had failed.
This is a grandfathered septic.
Yep, that one had failed. We were under contract, and so it was a great learning experience because we were able to do research with title to find that in the original documents there was an easement granted across one part of the property that it was split off of for a sewer extension to the street. And so they had to trench a sewer line across these people's property. We had to negotiate with them. They didn't want to do it. We had to pay them to let it happen, or the seller did. Give them money to let us do it, and then take a sewer line all the way out to the street, build a new sewer connection with the city. It was a $100,000 problem. But we got it solved. So it was hard.
Yeah. Well, back to what we were discussing earlier about mindset, right? Because mindset can help you accomplish things that a lot of people felt or feel might be insurmountable and they might walk away from. And in these situations, Stephanie, what you're encountering are insurmountable situations that you're able to overcome and find solutions for. So what you're really doing is you're just finding ways around the hurdles that are put in front of you to actually help your clients achieve their goals.
I will say that you said earlier something about deals canceling, and I will say, of course I've had escrows canceled, but over the course of my career, I feel like for the number of houses I've sold, which is getting to be over 2,000 properties, the number of properties that we've actually had deals cancel because we couldn't solve a problem is very small. And on my team, everybody knows that no one cancels a deal without calling us first. And if your client cancels, it says they want to cancel, then before you even talk to them, you come talk to me, because maybe there's a solution that you don't know about and that you need to learn about. Right. I didn't have that kind of mentorship. I had a great manager early on. I didn't have that kind of mentorship and access to somebody who could brainstorm with me. But we have a huge brain trust here.
That's right.
We have over 100+ years of real estate experience cumulatively. My escrow manager has worked with me for over 10 years. So, she has done many hundreds of transactions, and so it's really an interesting brain trust that we're able to tap into here. And, there's probably not a problem that we haven't seen. And occasionally she'll come to me and be like, every time I say I've seen it all, then something else comes along and here it is. But, I love that we can really sort of gut through those problems. I find that to be the stimulating part of the business. And when I was in special event planning, you're live at an event, right? You don't really have an option to be like, oh, we should just cancel because this problem came up. Yep. So,
it's funny that you have that experience, because I have some event management experience myself. In high school, I started throwing parties in, less than legal venues, let's just say. There were basically these crazy loft parties. And there were, so many problems that came up on the spot. And as a, 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, I just had to figure it out and roll with it. And, that trained me for a lot of things that were thrown at me in life in general, and particularly in this business. And, it's crazy that sometimes things will take on a life of their own, and we'll try to, sort of guide them and advise people. And at the end of the day, things will happen the way that they're meant to, right?
Well, Josh, first of all, it sounds like next time we have a coaching event or something in your town or my town, we got to get together and co-sponsor a loft party. That sounds amazing. So I want to come.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. And I actually, I met my wife, through an event like that. So it all worked out.
I mean, just the other day at the beer garden event, the day before the beer garden, they're like, all right, the liquor permit's in, but there can be no kids in the garden. And right? Because that's the whole thing,
Right. It's all about family and community.
Yes. So, we had to like problem solve, because that's literally Friday, like at 4:00, the liquor permit comes in and no kids in the beer garden. Well, now what are we going to do? Plus we built the beer garden bigger than ever to accommodate all these families. So, we came up with a solution, and it worked, and it was hard, and it was challenging. It was a lot more management, but there is no is what it is in my mind. Like, it's it may be what it is, but let's look at it and see if we can make it better, make it more, and make it work. Yeah.
Well, with that, Stephanie, thanks so much for joining us today on the Rubin Special. It's been a lot of fun talking about your history and experience. You are really, really impressive in all of your problem solving. And, I'm sure you're going to keep on knocking it out of the park with you and your team there in LA. Thanks again.
Thank you, Josh. It was a privilege and a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right.